Hello listeners, it's Tom here, me, Tom Crowley. You're about to hear the first in a brand new series of Faces of Virtue, or the extended Great Big Faces of Virtue if you're a Patreon supporter. But before we get to it, I need to remind you all that the first ever live Crowley Time show is coming soon to London Podcast Festival. It's at 4:30pm on Saturday the 14th of September, and it's a brand new episode entitled The Depony Contingency, all new material. My guest performers for one afternoon only will be sketch comedy royalty Gemma Arrowsmith and Paul Putner, and I can't wait to perform up there with them. I'm putting the show together right now at the same time as releasing these Faces of Virtues, and it's shaping up to be one of the funniest episodes I've ever written, I think. What's more, I'm delighted to say that tickets are actually selling already quite fast, and it's not a huge venue. So if you're looking to come along, I do recommend booking in advance at kingsplace.co.uk. As well as that, I should mention that you can also see me performing alongside Benjamin Partridge, who was crucial in making the episode you're about to hear, on the same day, right before Crowley Time, in his show The Beef and Dairy Network Podcast, at 2pm in the very same building. What a double bill! If you've already got tickets to see Three Bean Salad, which is just after Crowley Time at 7pm, you can have the most hilarious comedy triple bill ever without even leaving the venue. But you do need to have tickets for Three Bean Salad already, as it's sold out. But all three shows are at King's Place on Saturday the 14th of September, and to book for Crowley Time or Beef and Dairy, go to kingsplace.co.uk. That's kingsplace.co.uk. See you there. And now... In times of struggle, we must remember those who carve their own path. Some healthy, some wealthy, all wise. Those who wag their finger at blind faith and break wind openly in the presence of complacency. They are the Faces of Virtue! Greetings and welcomes, listeners, to another outing for this Crowley Time spin-off mini-series, where me, Tom Crowley, scour the land to find the ones who stick their necks out and say, loudly, with the mouths attached to the ends of those necks, that they're not going to stand for a less-than-ideal situation any longer. And those mouths, without exception, are attached to Faces of Virtue. We'll be spending these next 2 months meeting several of these faces during a break in your usual Crowley Time programming. Starting right now with Sidney Betancourt, who does his best to lighten the mood for his entire community. Many thanks to Benjamin Partridge for putting us in touch with Sidney. Sidney Betancourt, hello!
Hello there. Thank you so much for this opportunity to talk to you about what I've been up to.
No, I'm very excited to have you here. Thank you. Now, I was fascinated to hear about what you've been up to in your local area. Where are you from, by the way?
I'm from a small village called Burton Coggles.
Oh, lovely. It sounds wonderful. Full
name, Burton Le Coggles.
Burton Le Coggles, I see.
Yeah,
because of the French.
It was originally a Norman settlement.
Norman settlement, yeah.
And it's near Grantham in Lincolnshire.
Mm. Do you find the French influence still endures in Burton Le Coggles?
Not since Brexit, it has to be said. So we were called Burton Le Coggles, and then the day after the Brexit vote, somebody scrubbed out the Le, and they also set fire to a patisserie.
Okay.
And since then, it's been Best of British, and it's much better actually these days. We kind of know where we are. Yeah.
Okay. I'm guessing there was probably a Greggs put up in place of that patisserie.
Well, we did have a Greggs. We had a Le Greggs before.
Oh, I see. And then someone scrubbed out the
French-inflected Greggs.
Yeah.
After the Brexit vote, that's now just a regular Greggs. And we've replaced that patisserie then, not with the Greggs, because we already had the Greggs, with a World War I experience.
Okay, just to sort of remind everybody the pride of Britain, the best of British, and it makes sense.
It's a kind of immersive theatre thing, I guess you'd describe it as, yeah.
And we're not here. Well, we sort of are here to talk about sad occasions, but let's get right to the heart of the matter. Now, when I first heard about the work you were doing, I was so excited to hear that somebody was going out of their way, really reinventing our perception of days of mourning, days of grief or of commemoration, to try and turn them into a celebration. That's what I heard that you really do in your work, is you take moments that are traditionally just sad, very, very mournful and grey and unhappy, and then turn them into a celebration rather than a some sort of a fugue or is that the word I'm looking for? A kind of a lament, less of a lament and more of a celebration. So talk to us about that. How do you do that?
That's right. Well, I guess, you've got a bit of context about Burton Coggles. It's quite a sad place.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of sad things have happened here over the years.
Sounds like it quite recently as well.
Yes. I mean, I talk about the French. Obviously, in the early 1900s, we had the pogrom of the Belgians, where the Belgians were driven out.
Right.
So we've got a long history of kind of ethnic struggle. Largely,
I'm really sorry to distract you again, but what was the problem with the Belgians? It's the first time I've heard of a pogrom specifically of Belgians.
They were actually driven out by the French.
Oh, by the French, because they're sort of French-ish pretenders, aren't they? They're not quite committed to being French, but they do speak French, many of them. And yes, no, I understand. All right, I'm with you. Okay. So the French drive out the Belgians. Years later, the sort of, England fans, let's be honest, drive out the French. And so that's the Burton Coggles we know today. And I'm sorry, so it's a very sad place, as you were saying.
And of course, the Belgians had originally driven out the Dutch and so forth and so forth.
Yeah, of course. So, sort of a series of ceaseless sort of nationality-based cleansings in Burton Coggles over the years. Okay.
Yeah, and I think it feels like the place has got a kind of like a memory of these events.
Sort of haunted by them in a way.
Haunted, yeah, or maybe it's somehow deep in our genes. I'm not sure. Also, on top of the sort of the history of lowlands-based ethnic strife, the Danes, the Flems,
the Flems,
yes, weavers, of kinds, the lace
Danksks.
Women,
the lace women, yes, the basket weavers, the kind of Hessian cribs manufacturers.
Yeah, because as we're on a coast, we're on the North Sea coast, so we, it's one of those big melting pots. On top of that, in more modern times, we've become an absolute target or haven, depending on how you want to look at it, for plane crashes.
Oh,
yeah, we think it might be because my neighbour Cedric Johnson has got a massive magnet in his kitchen. Huge.
Oh,
magnet.
okay.
Yeah. We keep asking him what it's for. He won't say. He'll just say that if it's taken out of his household, his pacemaker will stop working. So,
okay, so he needs the magnet.
He's got us over a barrel. I don't know how true that is, but that's what he tells us.
It could be that maybe it's kept in some kind of centrifugal activity with a second magnet that you don't know about, maybe, possibly that keeps it in a constant rotation. People have had ideas about perpetual motion machines over the years using similar devices. I think the laws of entropy mean that such a thing can't work, but there's a chance he has a second power source powering the second magnet that will keep the pacemaker in operation, but he'd have to never leave his house. Does he ever leave his house?
No, he doesn't, because he's scared that someone will take the magnet away.
Okay, so there's every chance that could be the setup. Sorry, please do carry on.
Well, no, that's an interesting perspective. I've not really thought about it to that degree. I mean, I go around occasionally and just say, look, planes are crashing on a daily basis now. I think it's something to do with the massive magnet you keep telling us about. He won't show us it, but he tells us about it. And
you haven't even seen the massive magnet.
No, he won't let anyone see it.
Oh. Probably for fear that they'll find out where it is and steal it when he's not around, I imagine.
Exactly. And all he says is, I am so powerful, I'm becoming so powerful. That's what he'll tell me.
Right.
He'll begin to kind of chant it. I am so powerful, I am becoming so powerful. I am so powerful, I am becoming so powerful. And then he goes.
Well, normally I've heard of people who, the magnet. I've heard of people who suffer that kind of, needing to have a pacemaker installed or a bypass operation. I think people usually feel quite vulnerable afterwards. But whatever magnet-based setup he's got going, Mr. Johnson, it sounds as though he's had the exact opposite effect happen to him. He's become, if anything, more confident of himself.
Yeah, I mean, the one tip that I do know is that he didn't need, from a medical perspective, the pacemaker. He asked for it.
I see. How old is he?
He's 25.
He's 25 years old and he had an elective pacemaker put in.
Yes. The
magnet power. Okay.
The NHS wouldn't do it.
It's a Bupa job, isn't it?
So he went to the Philippines and got that done.
Okay.
I mean, it's big, the pacemaker. You can see it through his chest.
Okay.
And that's not normal, right? That's not.
No, that's not. No.
And it's got a lot of tubing and cabling coming out of it.
Most pacemakers that I'm aware of, you have a scar, of course. You have a sort of a scar down the centre of your chest where they've had to go in to install it.
No, it's more like, you know, an American muscle car where some of the engine's coming out of the top of the bonnet.
Popped out the top of the bonnet. Yeah, because it's so huge, the engine.
It looks like that.
But just to go back to the history of Burton Coggles for a moment, I mean, I can hear what you're saying about the place, that it has a sort of vibe of perhaps melancholy about it. I mean, lots of places feel like they have a kind of an inherited tragedy to them.
Generational trauma, I think.
That's right. I'm thinking of places like... small communities like London.
Yeah,
they often feel that way. That there's this sort of this weight of history on it that adds a sort of sense of depression.
Certainly, if you stand outside Eminem's world, I get a very similar feeling there than I do when I return to Burton Coggles. Yeah.
So this is a sense that you've had about Burton Coggles, and you feel as though there is this sort of sense of the weight of tragedy.
Yes, and
because
I would
you've had years of.
But there's a long list of reasons. You know, we've talked about the ethnic tensions based around the seafaring people of the North Sea. I didn't mention the Jutes, but I should have done. The
Jutes, of course. I mean, they go without saying, really, don't they, when you break this sort of thing down.
And of course,
it's sort of a rotating cast of brigands plundering and conquering the area.
Yeah, and taking candlesticks from the hands of monks. But what I would say is that if I had to rank all of the reasons why I felt that there was a deep melancholy in this town, I would say that number one is the ever-present threat that a plane's going to land on you. Yeah,
and as you say, it's more than one a day is happening?
It's about one a day.
About once a day.
Sometimes we'll get two, and then there won't be one the next day.
Oh, that's interesting.
If you average it off.
Well, I'm really sorry to do this again, but just to go back to Mr. Johnson's home, it could be that there's a sort of recharging element that happens. So
once the magnet has done its job.
That's right. If it's overexpended in one day, maybe the next day is a sort of going to seed, going to ground to recharge itself. Because, all right, so to get back to the point, what we're talking about here is a town mired in tragedy, almost daily tragedy, sometimes twice daily tragedy. And you, Sidney Betancourt, you took it upon yourself to change all that. Now, talk to me about that. When did you first decide you wanted to make a difference in your area?
Well, that's right. I mean, it all came to a head, really. There was one particular day where we'd had 4 plane crashes. Mm-hmm. The first plane had crashed.
It's a lot, isn't it, for a day?
It turns out planes are a bit like moths. If they see a big light on the ground, they think, that's the runway. But often it's the exploding fuselage of a Boeing 747, for example, in this.
Of another airplane.
Exactly.
Yeah, quite.
So they'll be attracted to that. Then they'll dive. And then before you know it, you've got another one. Then you've got an even bigger inferno, which another plane notices and
attracts even more.
Exactly.
That's terrible, because that could then create a sort of a cumulative effect where larger and larger planes, possibly like some enormous troop carrier, might...
or one with tanks in it.
Yeah, that kind of thing. A sort of troop transport plane could then end up, being the icing on the ground plane cake.
And when that happens, we actually send up our own fighter jet and start shooting them down before they hit the town. So they go into the North Sea. So actually...
makes you less popular with the other Lincolnshire villages, I imagine.
Well, that's the thing. So... even though we had 4 plane crashes in the village, the fighter took out a further 25 planes across the North Sea. But
okay.
But that's kind of out of sight.
And they all missed England, or they?
A lot of them hit the Netherlands.
Okay.
And that, of course,
actually ahead of them.
That, of course, stokes a certain amount of ethnic tension amongst the remaining lowlanders who still live here in Burton Coggles.
Already in the minority.
Exactly.
Yes.
And then we have a Dutch uprising. On this particular day, we'd had the plane crashes. We had
the 4 plane.
Then we'd had the other planes dropping onto the Netherlands. We'd had the Dutch riot.
Yep.
And I thought something's got to be done about this. We've got to stop this. Yeah. It's a chain reaction that I need to stop. Now, so I thought, well, what else is happening in the village today? Well, several funerals for the people who died in the previous plane crashes, which had happened only 2 days previously.
Okay.
So that's the other thing. We had a lot of funerals in this.
Yeah, I can imagine.
We had to build a mega funeral centre. So imagine...
I see, a sort of multi-funeral plex.
Yeah, exactly. So, imagine a mixture
yeah.
between St. Paul's Cathedral and a multiplex cinema.
A sort of very, very large view, I'm picturing, sort of like the sort of one around the Finchley Lido sort of area.
Yeah, kind of out-of-town style. Maybe, the kind of place you drive to, there's a car park, there's a Frankie and Benny's.
That's right, it's a Hollywood Bowl. Exactly the sort of thing I'm picturing.
Yeah, so that's what we did. We've got an out-of-town funeral centre that also does show movies as well.
Oh, really? Oh, that's a nice way to do it. So if there's only one funeral a day, which can happen on a one-plane day, or several days after a one-plane day.
What it is normally
the rest of the space
you don't tend to get a nighttime funeral. So in the evening, it's movies.
Yeah.
Morning, afternoon funerals.
They sound like a big step forward. Is that something that's come in recently, or have you been running that or has the town rather been running that for quite some time?
So that was another post-Brexit thing, really. So
really, okay.
Obviously that there was the stuff I told you about earlier that we're maybe not proud of, and as a community, we thought what can we do? And one of us, wasn't me, and it wasn't Mr. Johnson next door, but someone, we don't know who, wrote to Ryan Reynolds.
Oh, right, okay.
And they said, Ryan, you always look so chipper.
He does, yeah, he really does.
Maybe it's because you're a billionaire and have got no...
I thought the money might have something to do with it,
but maybe you've got the... you've got the key, to how to lead a cheerful life. That isn't just winning the genetic lottery of being really good looking.
Very, very good looking, and also the money
and
again.
Being a billionaire,
yeah.
And he said, well, tell you what, why don't we set up a system where I build a cinema in the town and I'll increase how much money I've got.
Yeah, well, because he's going to get his cut off the memberships and the cinema tickets.
Oh yeah, he owns the whole thing.
And he
owns the whole thing.
The higher cost for the Oh, that's amazing. God, so have you had a Disney Plus documentary made about the Burton Coggles cinema complex? I mean,
well, that's it. So obviously, he bought
Funerama complex, or whatever it's called.
So him and Rob McElhenney obviously bought Wrexham Football Club, thinking, I will make a documentary of us turning around this football club, right?
Yeah.
So, but that, what people don't realise is that's the second attempt. The first attempt,
really,
was when him and the guy who plays Sheldon in Big Bang Theory.
In the Big Bang Theory, yeah.
Built the funeral / cinema megaplex in Burton Coggles.
Mm-hmm.
And tried to make a documentary about the process. Unfortunately, the documentary was deemed to be too harrowing for Disney Plus.
I can imagine that actually the number of plane crashes that would have been happening during filming would have...
They don't like it. They think it's a bummer.
No, I mean, I can see that they've got an angle of, where's the happy ending? How does this tie in overall to the Disney brand?
Yeah.
And then there's the question of, is this an FX product? Is this a Disney or a Star Wars? Probably not a Star Wars. What's the banner this comes under?
I think another thing was,
does it fulfill the demographic needs?
I think another thing was that they felt that all of their products need to be viewable on a plane, because I think they get quite a lot of people hooked on their stuff when they're on an international flight, and maybe they watch a few episodes of Andor or something,
I'm going to watch the whole of, The Acolyte and, just binge my way through that. Yeah, absolutely.
And also, with the background of Northern European ethnic strife, the likes of which hasn't really been thought about or seen since the time of the Norman conquest and the Viking Danelaw.
The Viking raids. Yeah. We're talking about, long time ago. Very, very sort of a feudal system with largely boat-based trade law. Isn't it? That's kind of what we're going back to.
And Ryan and Sheldon, I'm going to call him Sheldon because I can't remember his name.
Did Rob McElhenney, was he involved in this project as well, or he was still in Wrexham dealing with that situation and Sheldon took over?
No, so this is pre-Wrexham. So basically, I think...
Oh, I see.
So what happened was the guy who played Sheldon, he died in a plane crash. And then Ryan went back to Hollywood and was like, "Oh, that really didn't work out."
Oh, you mean he was crushed by a plane during the making of the documentary about the Funerama Cineplex outside of Burton Coggles?
Yeah, he was hit.
He wasn't in a plane.
He was hit by a Ryanair. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Pancaked by a Ryanair.
I mean, you say pancake. Imagine you get a pancake, but you're making it and it's instantly heated up to like 1 billion degrees.
Sort of vaporized.
Yeah.
Pancake.
Yeah. So
wow.
Maybe it was a pancake for like a micron of a second. It was a pancake.
And then it was just dust, Sheldon vapor.
Then it was just vapor, and then luckily some teeth.
May I say, bazinga?
So after that, Ryan goes back to Hollywood and is down in the dumps, and his mate Rob McElhenney goes, "What's the matter?" And Ryan goes, "I've made the most incredible documentary of all time, but no one will let me show it." Because in the cut he'd made, that he wouldn't compromise on, you actually see Sheldon getting hit by the plane.
Oh my God.
And so some execs were like, maybe we can release this as a really edgy documentary, but you do have to lose what is essentially now a snuff element from this film. Anyway, so Ryan wouldn't compromise on the documentary. It's still in the vault, and he still wants to get it. He's a powerful guy in Hollywood, but even he can't get it released.
No.
And I think his friend McElhenney said, look, he showed it to McElhenney. And once McElhenney had stopped vomiting, he said, look, Ryan, you're an obviously talented documentary maker. You've got an eye. The way you've captured the community there of Burton Coggles is quite heartrending.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But let's do this again, but let's do it somewhere where someone isn't going to get hit by a plane, probably.
And where it's more Welsh and there's sport involved.
Yeah, and just have a slightly different, focus. And it's worked out for him. Fair play. Like, Welcome to Wrexham has been a huge hit.
It's been a big success. I mean, the vaporized Sheldon plane snuff film is just, it's not going to get the numbers that Welcome to Wrexham did. But that's what I mean. They're looking for that narrative arc where there's a redemption story inherent in it, And if you're going to some dark places, they want to see the town bettered by the end. But it sounds like they have done that, but only over maybe a decade of, not quite a decade. Are we talking about the Brexit referendum that this happened, or the actual leaving of Europe?
So it was the day after the vote. So it was June 2016 where we had the big uptick in trouble. And then Ryan Reynolds' documentary was made between 2017 and then the beginning of the pandemic, 2020.
Okay. All right. So then by then it's built. Yeah.
Yeah. And the pandemic actually was a real, it was a real breather for us as a community because obviously there weren't as many plane flights.
It's quite sort of badly chosen words, but I'll skip past that and we'll talk about the flights. Yeah, the flight element of it I can definitely see.
And I think it's possible that My Next Door Neighbor turned the magnet off. Or we don't know, but things felt different for a while. And then once the pandemic ended, we got back to normal. That was the problem. And then Ryan by then had moved on. But we did have the funeral plex and it's...
That had been finished, okay.
And it's working.
Oh, great.
In terms of what I'm doing, I'm trying to push it that bit further.
Yeah.
And just do, what can one person do? I'm not Ryan Reynolds. I'm not a billionaire.
No.
I don't have a vodka brand or a gin brand or whatever.
You're not good looking.
I'm not good looking.
No.
I'm a hopeless actor. I was friends with Sheldon.
Oh, really? Well, while he was there, I suppose.
Yeah, he just got to know us.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm not doing much, but I'm thinking, what can one man do to make this place more cheerful? And my answer is, I will go to anywhere where sadness exists, be that a riot or a funeral. And at the moment that I think it's the most funny, I'll honk an air horn.
An air horn, right. So one of the gas-powered sort of...
Really loud.
Like one of... Yeah.
And
so maybe when the priest says, can we... or rabbi or whatever denomination the people are.
Oh, actually, sorry, just to
when they say...
In the multiplex, it's entirely non-religious.
Ah, a secular funeral.
Well, it's so this was on the say-so of Ryan Reynolds, who paid for it all. The deity that is recognised within the walls of that building is Ryan Reynolds.
Ah, okay. So our Ryan, who art in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Reynolds be thy name.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Right. So we'll see where we're going with this. So it's a sort of Ryanist enclave. That makes sense. I mean, he paid for it, so why not?
Yeah.
Okay. So the stand-in Ryan in the Deadpool costume is perhaps he'll say, "Can we just take a moment of quiet to keep in mind all the things that this person who was hit by this plane meant to us?"
Yeah.
And that's when you'll like from the back of the room.
No, not from the back. So.
Oh.
No. I mean, to begin with, yes. I've got a bit of a routine now.
Oh, well, talk us through that.
So, I'm dressed as a caretaker.
Yeah, okay.
I've got a trolley with loads of mops on it and stuff. At that moment in the funeral, or maybe just in the middle of the eulogy sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I'll come in. Oops. Oh, sorry everyone. I didn't realize there's a funeral going on in here. And I start doing my slapstick. So I push over one of the mops, I trip over the mop, the bucket goes. I get up, I try and mop up what's come out of the bucket with another mop. Then I go over again. Then I get the other bucket. So then that begins, right? People start laughing and tittering, right?
Mm. Yeah.
And then I hit them with the air horn, but I don't just do it. I grab my bollocks at the same time. So it looks like my bollocks are like a hooter.
Right. Now, this is making a lot of sense to me now because what you're describing sounds very familiar. And you say you do this at all sad occasions.
Yeah. So it's not just funerals. I mean, I started doing it at the funeral megaplex, and actually they employ me now to do that. They recognize that is actually a net benefit to the people grieving. And that's part of the package, really. You know,
this is making sense to me now because I remember at the most recent Armistice Day, the memorial celebrations, there was a montage on BBC News of how different communities were celebrating.
Yeah,
and now that I think about it, I remember I remember there being a lot of Deadpool posters around, and I remember a not classically good-looking man dressed as a janitor falling about arse over tit and grabbing his bollocks and blowing off an air horn. That sort of, it felt like they didn't mean to include that in the compilation of clips. It sort of, it went, and it was cut halfway through. It sort of felt like it snuck in there by mistake. Someone wasn't paying attention in the edit suite. Was that you?
Well, think about it. Where's a better place to pull off that kind of act than in the middle of what's meant to be a 2-minute silence?
Well, yeah. Yeah. No, he is. It was funny. It was funny.
And people...
No, fair enough, yeah.
People loved it. I mean, I say loved it. I mean, people were exercised by it. You know,
yes.
If they weren't laughing, they were furious, but they weren't necessarily sad.
No.
You know, they weren't thinking about the fact that there was a plane crash yesterday. They were annoyed at me for, in their words, desecrating a monument.
Mm.
Do you see what I mean? So suddenly they're thinking about something else.
Yeah, they're completely distracted, aren't they? I mean, you've taken all of you're the Pied Piper of their hatred in a way.
Well, not a hatred necessarily. A lot of people love what I'm doing.
Okay.
And a lot of people who started out hating it have come to realize what I'm doing, and now they understand, and they don't hate it anymore. They understand what I'm doing. I'm just a distraction.
You're a distraction.
From the grinding pain and sadness that exists here in Burton Coggles.
Well, I think it's a wonderful effort that you've made, and I think and thank you very much. I'm delighted to feature you here on Faces of Virtue because from what you're saying, it sounds like you really have made a very serious difference to the mood of the town. It sounds like there's a much more jubilant mood at times in Burton Coggles, and compared to a few years ago, that sounds like a hugely transformative. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely, and it's sad in a way that they're not making a documentary about me, and it's sad that Ryan isn't here. Obviously, it's sad that Sheldon's not here, but
Sheldon's not. Yeah,
they're not here to make the documentary. The documentary is no longer being filmed, and maybe had Ryan stuck around, this could have been the uplifting part of the documentary, which leavened the whole thing, and would mean that the Disney executives would overlook the fact that you literally see one of the world's most famous actors being turned to sand.
Yeah, ash, vapor. Yeah, sand.
Because of this uplifting bit at the end, when a bloke dressed as a janitor grabs his bollocks during a 2-minute silence for the war debt. You know, that is the kind of uplifting end to that narrative that they missed out on. Because, and I'm sorry, I'm sounding angry here, and I'm trying to be fair to him, but if Ryan hadn't fucked off and bought Wrexham instead and had done this, I think he would have been better. You know, we'd all been better off. I'd been better off because I'd be in Deadpool doing my act.
Of course, yeah. There is space for a janitor, I believe, in Deadpool Wolverine. I'm sure there must be some sort of facility that needs. I've seen a lot of 4-star
reviews for that movie.
Yeah,
and I think I am the final star. That
the fifth star, the missing star, is that extra element. Yeah, that was funny. Sorry. Yeah, that was good. You're very good at that. You do pick your moments very well. Well, I have to admit, I was somewhat skeptical when I first heard you describe, the air horn, the interruption of the sad occasions. Dare I say it, a part of me had thought, who on earth is this? Like, how dare he call me in to just hear about how he pricks about blowing off an air horn and grabbing his bollocks. But, from hearing the way you describe the impact you've had on your local community, it sounds absolutely wonderful. And I take it all back. I'm delighted and very, very proud to feature you on this program. You are indeed a face of virtue.
Thank you so much. It's so good to finally get some recognition. The local people don't necessarily give me that recognition. The things they say to me aren't that. But
what sorts of
they'll say
things are they saying?
For God's sake, stop! This is a funeral.
Yeah.
May the souls of those who died in this great conflict haunt you forevermore. Things like that. But what they're really saying is thank you.
Well, I think that's a beautiful note to end on. Sydney Betancourt, thank you.
My pleasure.
Sydney's selfless dedication to inserting himself equally into people's grieving process and into harm's way perfectly sums up what I'm trying to achieve with this series. He has demonstrated that he's going to do all he can to help people, whether they like it or not. And if that doesn't make you one of the faces of virtue, then I don't know what does. Don't forget that if you want to hear the full, unedited and unleashed great big version of Sydney's interview, you need only go to patreon.com/CrowleyTime and sign up to support this show. All 3 membership tiers get the great big Faces of Virtue episodes, so sign up now and get all the extended versions of the upcoming new series when they release, as well as all the bonus material ever released for this show. Here's just some of what you're missing out on from this episode.
And he's also got a metal penis.
Maybe she's trying to advocate for better trade links with North America.
What other more profound and emotional and human experience is there than watching the Na'vi? Maybe we just call in an airstrike or something.
Ooh, that's tantalizing. And here are some people that will already be enjoying that extended cut. People I'd like to thank dearly. This show's executive producers: Amanda Waterman, Andy Case, Diggory Laycock, Dr. the Eliminator, George Cantor, Gigi Catherine, James Roberts, Katrina Powers, Kim M, Matt Luckcuck, Meme, Michaela McNally, Purple Strawberry, Samantha Dye and Peter Shanks, and Tobias Anderson. And the greatest thanks of all to this show's Supreme Champion Producers! The wonderful, the magical, the irresponsible Laurel Carlson and Paul Tiemann. That's patreon.com/CrowleyTime to sign up for great big Faces of Virtue and much more besides. Once again, I'd like to thank Benjamin Partridge for putting me in touch with Sydney. Ben is the creator of the Beef and Dairy Network podcast, one of the greatest works of comedy ever committed to the podcast medium, and he's also one of the titular beans in the runaway juggernaut of lukewarm banter, 3 Bean Salad. Both of those shows are absolutely essential day one listens for me every time a new one comes out, and if you haven't checked them out yet, then I call you fool and bungler. Remedy that now by listening to the Beef and Dairy Network podcast and 3 Bean Salad. You won't be disappointed. And be sure to check back here in 2 weeks to meet another very exciting guest vying to become one of the Faces of Virtue.